Alright, I'm gonna start putting this gun back together in assemblies. I put like the trigger group back together, the bolt back together, the stock back together, any parts back together that I can in small assemblies just to clear up the small parts on the bench. I'm gonna start with the trigger assembly because there's the most amount of small parts involved. Take the trigger housing, put the safety in. The safety on this gun is not reversible like modern guns. Comes in from the right to the left with that notch, goes into the notch in the trigger guard there, like that. You're gonna drop that little detent down in the hole. Best way I've found to do it is try and drop it right in. If you can just drop the detent right into that hole, it's the easiest way. You can try with the pliers, but sometimes they spring. Now we're gonna get the trigger set in there, and then we're gonna get the spring covering that detent so we don't drop it. Just set the trigger in. It doesn't have to be in the perfect positioning yet. We're just gonna put it in there so we can put the detent and trigger return spring back in. The trigger return spring, it's gonna have ears that go in these grooves here, one here, one here. The way we do that is we're gonna start it going in, we're gonna push down, just slide it in like that. You're gonna run out of real estate on the spring to hold, so just let it go. Then push it forward as far as you can. Sometimes you have to tap them in. This one I'll probably have to tap in. Yeah, not strong enough to push it, so I'm gonna tap it forward like that. Making sure that I don't drop the detent out. Alright, we're gonna push it forward just far enough that the mainspring screw hole is clear, and it's gonna go through there. Now we're gonna back the trigger in. It'll snap into place like that, so that it's back in the safety slot there. And then we'll put the trigger pin in. Trigger pin is gonna have a flared side where someone has used a staking tool on it. It's really hard to see on this one. It's right there. Just look for a line where someone has staked one side of the trigger and the trigger pin, and that's the side that's gonna go right here, so that when you pound it in, it's gonna be stuck in this side. You don't wanna pound that through the hole. It will be very hard to get out, and it will mess up the hole. On these older guns, it's pretty standard to have them right to left. You put pins in from the right, take them out from the left. Some modern guns aren't that way. Now we're gonna put the hammer in. Hammer is just like this. The front hole is for the trigger assembly screws that holds the trigger into the receiver. The next one back is where we're going to put the hammer pin through. Again, this pin is going to go from right to left. We're going to use, again, there's a flared end. This one is this end. Just want to put that on the right side. All right, now this is the mainspring. It goes in this orientation. The best way I've found to get it in there is to put it over that pin, rotate it, and kind of push it forward, and it will slide down over the trigger. It takes a little bit of fiddling. You can get it like that. And then we're going to line it up with the rear main pin, or the mainspring screw hole, and we'll put the mainspring screw in. Mainspring screw is going to be one of the only ones that doesn't have a retaining screw notch in it. When we have it this far, we're going to make sure that the hammer cocks is released and that the safety works. That way we don't get everything back together and realize that it's wrong. So like that. Next part we're gonna put in is the in battery safety. So it's gonna go right there. There's gonna be a spring and detent that go right there. Spring and detent goes in that hole there. I've cocked the hammer to keep the main spring out of the way. I'm gonna hold the detent down with one finger and line up and install this part with the other. It's gonna go just like that. And it's gonna keep the gun from firing when the bolt is open. When the bolt is closed, it hooks that and you can fire the gun. That is the trigger assembly put together. We're gonna set that to the side and we're gonna start with the bolt. We're gonna put the extractor and shell holder or shell support in. We're gonna start with the shell support. The shell support looks like this. The extractor looks like this. Shell support goes on the left side of the bolt. The shell support spring is a short stubby spring. It's gonna go in the furthest back hole right there. Then the shell support is gonna sit on top of it. Then we're gonna grab the pin, which looks like that. There is a staked section at the top. You can see it there. That's going to go down from the top with the stake section up here. You should be able to line up the hole and slide it all the way down to about there. Just going to hold the shell support in. You want it to be below the surface of the bolt and above the bottom surface, so it needs to be recessed there and there, otherwise it'll catch. Now we're going to put the extractor in. The extractor spring looks like this. It's going to go in this way to a hole. Then the extractor looks like this. It's going to get pushed in from the front and set down in. And take the extractor pin like this, line it up. It should again be able to be lined up ahead of time, and it's staked as well, top down. All right, again, we're gonna make sure it's recessed at the top and at the bottom, and that it's functioning properly. Now we're going to put the locking lug back in. Just slides in through the top like that. Slides in through the top like that. The firing pin will go in next. The notch goes up. Slide in like that, and we'll put the firing pin retaining pin in. Firing pin retaining pin is one way. Again, it's staked, flattened out, one on each side. We're gonna put that in from the right to the left. All right, like that. That's gonna keep the whole assembly together. Now this final pinhole here is for this here. I'm not gonna have a good angle once it's in the gun, so I'll show you this. This is the one that we pounded the pin out from this hole through this notch. So I'm gonna show you how to put it together outside of the gun, and we will hopefully clarify some things. So it's the spring that's closed on both sides like that. It's gonna go down through that hole there. This is gonna set on top of it. And then you're gonna put the pin in from the right to the left, like that. like that. And then this will set down in all the way flush. I'm going to take that back out because that has to get done inside the gun. And this back up. When this is in the gun, it's going to set just like that. 2 parts, set just like that. The butt plate back on. This type, I'm going to have to push those screws through. Just push them through. And then make sure that there's oil on them still so we don't mess up the butt pad. Just drip oil on there. And we'll cinch those down. If your screw holes seem to be stripped out, make sure to fix them. You never want to have a loose butt pad. It doesn't look very professional to the customers, and it's pretty easy to fix. So that's just something that we fix on all guns. If we need to take the butt pad off and the butt pad screws are stripped or the wood is stripped, just fix it. Wood glue and a dowel, you can close up that hole and re-drill it. It's probably the best way to do it. You can drop some Johnson's paste wax on the screw and put some epoxy in the hole, and then screw it in. Leave it for about an hour and come back and loosen that screw up, clean off the Johnson's paste wax, and go from there. Alright, butt pad is installed nice and tight, new screws. We're going to set the stock to the side again so it doesn't get damaged. The next thing we're going to put together is the small parts in the receiver. We're going to put the magazine block in. It's going to go in this orientation. I'm going to line up that pin, push it through. Now we're going to take the spring that looks like this, set it over the top, line it up with this screw hole, put in this screw right there. This one needs to be fairly tight. It does have a bad habit of working out. Alright, now all we have left is the bolt drop. The receiver oriented like this. It's going to be oriented like this underneath with the button right there. So you'll slide the button in. Easiest way I've found is to balance it on one finger, like that. Slide it in like that, and then you can go ahead and turn it on the other side. Slide this piece in like this, with the spring to the back, and that'll hold it all together while you're getting your pin in. Alright, now we're going to put our bolt back in the gun. We're going to slide it into the receiver in this orientation. We're going to slide it into about there. And we're going to take the bolt handle, work it in, just slide it in on this latch. Slide the bolt back to where it starts to line up and work them together. This lever has to be up in order for the bolt handle to slide in, like that. Now, we're going to put that part in that I showed you outside of the gun. We're going to line up that hole with that notch right there. And then we're going to drop the spring down into that hole, put it all in place. We're going to drop the spring down in. We're going to drop this piece down in, and this goes from right to left, so you line it all up, drop the pin down in, which is staked on that side. You want the stake to be coming down from the top. Make sure that that's set all the way down in. slide through there. Like that. Line it up again. You can see down in there. Make sure it's all lined up. Alright, now we're going to put the main spring back in. The bolt return spring. Got the plunger. It's going to go in this end. The wooden dowel in this end. I'm going to line it up with that guy there. Press it down in. Line up the two holes. Put the retaining pin through. Make sure the retaining pin is centered and release it. And it's going to hold it in like that. Alright, now we're going to put this piece in. It's going to go in this orientation, and it's going to be held in by this screw here and the screw on the opposite side. So, drop it down in. Line up the holes. I line up the right side first and drop the corresponding screw in and just get it started. And then I'll go and line up the left side. Since there are two parts to line up, you can see they're not aligned, and then align them like that. And then we'll drop the left side screw in. Tighten these down to where the notches for the retention screws line up. You don't need to over tighten these. That's what the retention screws are for. So we'll line up the retention screw notch like that. Do the same on the other side. And then we'll put the retention screws in. Remember, the retention screws are matched, so try and remember which ones you take out first. They're timed. Same on the other side. Alright, that part's in. Looks something like this. And now we need to get the spring in there. So this spring sets on this post here, and it sets in this orientation. It's a little bit hard to get in there. It's hard to show on camera. Once it's in there, I'll show it to you. I'm gonna lay it down on the counter. Like this. Down on its level. Start it on its peg, like this. So I'll show it to you halfway through here. So I have it started. It's on its peg here, and it's on its the spot it'll land down here. So all we have to do is get this spring down and around this peg and drop it on. And now it's spring loaded. Make sure that's all seated properly, flat against the receiver. And we're ready to put our trigger group back in. This needs, in this position, when the bolt is all the way forward, needs to go in and be pushed out of the way. So if you come in with the trigger group like this and push it kind of up and forward, that's going to get that out of the way. Then you can line up these screws and put them in like pins, and then screw them down tight and put their corresponding screws in, their corresponding retaining screws. Again, you don't need to cinch these down. That's what the retaining screws are for. Just will line up the notches. All right, now we're going to put the friction rings back together. We need the spring to be on the outside of the brass piece. Now, the easiest way is probably to set it on the counter. The splits need to be separate, opposite, opposing, I guess would be the right word. Get it started and just tap it down in. Once it gets most of the way there, you're going to need to use a punch to tap it down in. Alright, and let's just center it up somewhat, like that. Now, these rings work like this. So there is a taper on the inside of this barrel ring, which matches with the taper on the front of this friction ring. When the barrel recoils, it's going to push against it and close this friction ring. In normal operation, the spring is going to ride right here. So there's only one side of this friction ring getting pressed on. If you want to set it up to shoot magnum shells, you have this ring that normally sits at the bottom of the receiver, and you'll put the taper towards the friction ring, like that. So under recoil, it's compressing both sides of the friction ring. I don't shoot very many magnum loads through this gun, so this ring goes onto the receiver. Make sure that it is flat side toward the spring, like that. You don't want it to compress the spring. Now, we're going to put the big old spring on. We're going to slide the friction rings down on. Sometimes they need a tap. That. Then the barrel can go back on. Drop the follower down in this orientation. This follower goes all the way down in. The magazine spring will drop down in. These magazine springs should be about 1.5 times the length of the magazine rod. It's a general rule of thumb. Each manufacturer is slightly different. Put your spring clip back in. They're kind of a pain to put back in, but they're going to save the next guy from launching the magazine cap. Set them on, push them down, tap them down. All right, like that. Slide your forearm down on the gun. Now there's going to be a gap right here. You're going to want to pull the bolt back and lock it open. Press the gun or the barrels and the handguard all the way down into the gun, like that. Hold it down. Screw your barrel nut on. Tight as you can. Don't need to over tighten it, but make sure that your barrel will press down onto the receiver and that's tight. Now, make sure the gun is cycling as it should. Make sure your magazine cap or magazine stop is forward. That's normal operating. Now, all we have to do is put the stock back on, slide it in, tap it on. Stock bolt goes in through the bottom. This is going to pull the two tangs together, so you want to make sure it is nice and tight and not to be over tightened, because there's again a locking screw, but this one is the tightest of all of them. Drop that locking screw in. There you have it. Last screw to go in. Before I get these guns back to the customer, I always take, at the very least, cycling dummies and put them through the guns, make sure that I didn't make any mistakes, make sure the hammer drops, all that sort of thing. Always make sure the safety works, and you have a completed gun.